Well, hello there, everybody, and welcome to the Fox Den here on the Fox D Network. My name is Heath Douglas, and on today's show here, we have with us a very wonderful skincare man who has been given everything from zits and pimples to scars and scabs a run for their money. Please welcome to the show Dr. Jeffrey Scales. Jeffrey, please welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, sir. It's a real pleasure.
Oh, you're no problem. Now, there is a lot to get into with not just your own practice and everything, but there's also a lot of tips and tricks I also want to get into as well. Because as a skincare doctor, you do have a lot of people that have various things that they say, like rubbing lava rocks on their skin, using seaweed, all that sort of stuff. And I want to get your take on all that sort of stuff to see what separate the fact from the fiction, as it were. So we'll definitely get into all that. But before we do, just want to let you guys know that we are going ahead and talk about our sponsor, which of course is this network's coin, the Fox D coin. Fox D coin is a totally community-driven coin with no pre-mine and no developer's wallet that's keeping the coin behind any sort of paywall. Fox D is a 100% transparent coin that's open to everybody, making it where it is a coin that is for the people and by the people. The unique advantage that Fox D offers is what we're utilizing right now, which is the Fox D network. And the coin gives everybody the opportunity to get seen on our network and gives your content a chance to shine and be able to grow with us as well as your audience growing too. We're always accepting new guests, streamers, and contributors to the network. So if you do want to expand your brand, you know what to do. Check us out on our website at foxdnetwork.com. That is Fox, the letter D, network.com. Or if you want to be able to get involved in the coin and buy some yourself and get your own wallet, you can check it out at foxdcoin.com. That is Fox, the letter D, coin.com, where you can download your own wallet, like I said, or if you want to buy some coins yourself, you can check us out on Crex24, BitSales, FX, and Free Exchange. So, Doctor, for the folks at home, should I call you doctor? Should I call you Jeffrey? Like, how professional do you like to normally be addressed by?
I will respond to any of the above. I don't mind being called doctor, but certainly Jeffrey was my given name, so Jeffrey would be fine.
All right, sure. So for the folks at home and for maybe the folks that don't know about you and your practice, kind of give us some insight into your humble beginnings as what made you want to actually end up being a dermatologist and really what made you want to go down that path?
It's a great question. I come from a family that was focused on medicine. My mother was a nurse, and at a very young age, I had an opportunity to be exposed to medicine. And the detective nature of it really drew me in. Medicine is the ultimate puzzle. Each time you see a person, you're thinking about what is the underlying problem that led to what you see or what you hear.
Right.
I trained originally as a pediatrician. I spent a number of years working in inner city clinics and taking care of children. And I trained at the University of Chicago in Chicago on the South Side. It was a wonderful experience.
Nice.
But one of the things I noticed was that there was a disproportionate amount of skin problems associated with children. And when I wanted to have them to be seen by a specialist in dermatology, it was very difficult to do, particularly for children who were poor and didn't have access to better resources. So as a result of having been exposed to that and the good fortune of being able to train with a woman who is a very well-known pediatric dermatologist, I got an opportunity to consider dermatology after my pediatric practice. So I went to Wake Forest Baptist Hospital and trained in dermatology. And I'm drawn to the visual things in life most. I love looking at pictures. I love art. I love the expressionists. I have all sorts of art throughout my office, including Picasso and all sorts of artists. And of course, they're not the original. Yes, it's one of those ones that hasn't been discovered yet. Yes.
Right.
But I am very visually focused. And in fact, I spend a fair amount of time talking to the patients about some of the artwork we have. We have Georgia O'Keeffe, as well as others, a few local artists. But anyway, the visual aspects of things drew me into dermatology. What I like about it is that you see what the problem is, as opposed to having to imagine. If I go to listen to your heart, unless I use some kind of device, be it a CT or an ultrasound, I have to imagine what's going on. With the skin, I can look and see what's going on And then I can spend the rest of my time trying to figure out what the cause might be and what the treatment might be. But you'll find that many doctors are very interested in dermatology, regardless of their specialty. I speak to a number of them, and they just think it was a great decision to go into dermatology, and they've always enjoyed just seeing things and trying to discover the nature of it.
Right, right. Well, and you do mention a good point. I think that's one of the things about dermatology is I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not trying to discredit you going to the university and going through all that. So for anybody that does any sort of medical, for the record, I'm not saying that it's an easy walk through it all. But you're right, is I think with dermatology is, it is one of the things you can see somebody's zits, you can see somebody's scars, you can see the lesions versus you're right, where it's something where if you're stomach doctor, you're throwing a lot of different pills, you're doing a lot of medications. And, for you, I think that's where the easy part comes in is like, oh, you have a zit? Okay, well, just don't eat chocolate for 6 weeks and, you'll get over it kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And I think that while it seems relatively straightforward, as you mentioned, I think that's a really good description of what you saw. There are more diagnoses in dermatology than any other specialty. So there's well in excess of 2,000 different diagnoses. So in addition to being able to see things with your eyes, you have to have a good visual memory. Mm-hmm. So there are things that I might see that I haven't seen for 4 or 5 years, but when they appear, I have to be able to recall those things. I can also go to reference text, but still,
sure.
You need to have the ability to recall things visually fairly quickly. And I think that that's one of the strengths about certain people that go into dermatology.
Sure, sure. Well, and when you're doing a lot of your dermatology work, talking about being easy or hard, how easy would you say it is for you to be able to quickly diagnose somebody on certain levels? Is that on a patient thing, or is that more like, well, it's a case by case basis, or is it like, no, I can look at someone 2 seconds and say, yep, you need to do this, 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 and this?
So it's a good question. I think that the bulk of what you see in any medical specialty, be it dermatology or gastroenterology or any other specialty, is the routine day-to-day things. Mm-hmm. And I recall 2 really helpful professors that said something to me about that. One of them said that you have to be able to separate the zebra among the horses. So if you hear hoofbeats, you got to know when to think something a bit more unusual. Secondly, that you have to be comfortable looking at the day-to-day things like eczema and acne, yet being able to tell when there are subtle differences that show up that appear to be the thing that you thought it was, but turns out to be something else. I think one of the more rewarding things about some of the things that I do is I have an opportunity occasionally to make some very unusual diagnoses, sometimes things that other doctors might have seen because of my years of experience.
Sure.
So someone may have called something one thing, and I get to investigate a little further and help to come to maybe a better answer for the patient. So I do think it's capable of being easy, and most of it is routine, but you have to be you have to have a full knowledge of the field to be able to completely practice. In the kind of practice I have, yes, the majority of things are straightforward acne, eczema, but we had 2 very unusual cases just within the last 2 days that are going to require some real investigation and some other consideration.
Right. And how often, when you do talk about some of these, interesting cases, how often do those show up? Because, for example, and again, I don't know her and I'm not picking on her, but things like the Dr. Pimple Popper, we see these shows on television of people that have massive, just huge boils, and they have, these scars and these pimples that just, look almost grotesque. Is how often do you actually see those? Because on television, we see them all the time. But as a dermatologist, how often would you say that you, or maybe even your colleagues, see those? Or is it rare? Is it pretty normal? Like, what would you say on your end?
Well, the things that Dr. Pimple Popper sees are really routine things that most dermatologists see.
Really?
I am surprised. What I have found very interesting is that this Dr. Pimple Popper, who I have a great deal of admiration for, has taken something that the majority of us have been doing for years and turned it into a TV show in a way that I just never expected. If you had asked me 10 years ago whether someone would want to watch someone removing those sorts of things and find it entertainment, I would have told you no. I do that type of surgery several times a month. Some of it, the part that is left out of some of that is the smell.
Oh,
it can be quite strong. It can be quite strong. But yes, those are things that we see routinely, and we and we treat routinely. Depending on where the doctor practices, where the dermatologist practices, that determines a lot about what you see. So for instance, if I am based at the university, I see a lot of the more difficult cases. I see the harder cases. I see more of the unusual cases.
Sure.
Because that's the point of being hospital-based, is that you are the further authority about things that can be challenging.
Yes.
If I'm practicing in the community, as I do, then the types of things I see include some of the things that they see, but they also include a lot of routine things as well. So I think it really depends on where you're located. So if I practice, say, in Miami, Florida, there are things I'm going to see that are really different than I might if I practice, say, in Minnesota or Maine. Really? So the geographic location has a lot to do with it. I see a lot of children where I am, and I see a lot of eczema and acne. There are places where people practice, such as farming areas, where people see a lot of skin cancer. Almost every patient that walks in has a skin cancer. And certainly we see our share of skin cancer, but not to the degree that they might see in that setting, because that's where people have gotten exposed a lot to the sun over many years. They're outdoors a lot. So it can vary quite a bit depending on where you live and where you practice.
Contact us at foxdnetwork.com to set up your time to be on TV.
That does make a difference. And you hit it right on the head. If you are in a place where you're outside a lot and you are of an outdoor nature, you have an outside job, then you are going to end up with a lot more sun exposure than the average person. The statistic says that I've read says that 80% of the sun you get under 20 years of age. But if you are a farmer or someone who works outside a lot, that is not going to be the case. So it really depends on what kind of jobs people have, and also what kind of recreational things people do, whether they use tanning beds. That's a very big deal in certain communities. Yes. That's quite a big deal. So it can vary quite a bit. I find that the practice of dermatology can be quite unique to each doctor. People will come to my practice and see a number of things. We see quite a number of children, quite a number of people of color, quite a number of young professionals, just based on the location of our office here in the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina.
Right. And you did mention about with children, because I want to kind of delve into that, is you had mentioned in an article, why is it that exactly that you have a lot of children? Because most of us would assume that most patients would probably be teenagers, for example. You're going through puberty, you have those fits, you want to try to cover them up. But what is the reason that you're seeing a lot of more children than you would anything else?
Well, it's because there's a fair amount of skin disease in children. We don't think about it in the way that you might think about it because of skin cancer. But 20% of children under the age of 5 have some form of this skin disease called eczema. And it is a very itching condition. It can be quite difficult for the children, even to the point that some of them are unable to attend school. It disrupts the whole family as well. And so those sorts of things have to be addressed in the same way that you would some of the other skin problems that occur as adults. And another reason why I mention children is that it is different learning to take care of children as patients and adults as patients. My wife is a pediatrician, and she reminds me that children are not many adults. And your approach to talking to patients who will have their children with them, your way of discussing things with children, your way of managing things with children, such as if you have to do something that's unpleasant, is really different than it is with adults. And so oftentimes people have not necessarily been trained in that setting. And so you find that many people are a bit shy about taking care of children at times. Dosing medications are different. Side effects are different. So as a result of having trained in both pediatrics and in dermatology, I've developed a niche in the community where I will see a disproportionate number of children, along with many other doctors that specialize in seeing children for skin diseases as well.
Wow. And like you said, you hit the nail on the head with, children are different in terms of, how you diagnose them and how you talk to them, because with an adult, you can just straight out give them, listen, you have this eczema, you need to take this pill and this shot and this. you tell a kid that, they're not going to actually not only just comprehend that, but that's a big, scary thing for a lot of these kids, because to them, they have no idea what's going on. And they think, oh my gosh, he's going to kill me.
Yes. True. There is a lot of fear that's associated with seeing the doctor as a child. I was one of those children. I remember running full speed out of the doctor's office several times with my mother following me. And I can remember one day almost getting to the front door, and I just saw freedom. My mother scooped me up and brought me back into the doctor's office and promptly gave me a spanking, and I sat there and got used to it. So, but there is a great deal of fear about the doctor, and learning to work within the confines of what you're able to do with children is part of the experience. And also learning to listen to things that others may not want to listen to. A crying child during an entire visit takes a patience, and it takes a desire to be willing to sit through that. So that can be a bit challenging at times. But you were right that taking care of children is a really different kettle of fish. I have always enjoyed it. I think there's nothing more noble in medicine than taking care of a child. And so I think it's a great blessing that I have an opportunity to work with children and families.
Get your shows, podcasts, gaming, or any live streaming on our TV network.
Cool. And even with, both in terms of children and even adults and teenagers, I guess, all three across the age gap, is when you're talking about the differences in things like eczema or zits or whatever, have you seen over the years, because you practiced for, 20 plus years now, have you seen conditions where, for example, it might be worse in children maybe 20 years ago versus now, or, this problem for teenagers didn't show up 20 years ago, but now it is? Like, have you seen a transition in different skin care issues, or has it relatively stayed the same throughout the many years?
I think you bring up a very good point. I think there's two or three things that come to mind when I think of that. Number one, that acne appears much earlier in children now than it used to. Mm-hmm. When I originally started practicing medicine back in the Middle Ages, it seems like, if you had acne in a child under 12 years of age, that was considered very early. Mm-hmm. Now it's not uncommon to see a child as young as 8 or 9 years of age.
Really?
What you used to consider was that they had to be going into puberty early. Mm-hmm. And as a result, if you saw a child with acne, you may investigate further to determine if they were going into puberty early. If you have a child that's going into puberty at 10, mm-hmm. they may advance in some ways, but they end up very short. And you certainly don't want them to go into puberty at 10 and 12 years of age. So that was a sign to investigate further. Granted, this is back in the late 80s.
Sure.
But now it's not uncommon to see children that are 8, 10, 12 years of age. If you ever went to a high school or junior high when I was growing up, most of the kids were very skinny and kind of tall and this sort of thing. If you go to a junior high or high school now and look at children, they look like adults, even in middle school and even beyond. It amazes me how much more advanced children are in puberty than they used to be. Mm-hmm. And issues come with that. As I said, acne is one, and a host of other things. Another issue that comes up that's changed over the years with children is the development of melanoma in children a little younger than they used to be. I would call this maybe young adults. Mm-hmm. So as the result of easier access to things like tanning beds, there's been an increased incidence in the numbers of melanomas that you see, albeit early melanomas in younger adults. Not children to the same degree, but you certainly are seeing it more in the 20s, particularly with women who have used tanning beds in a way that didn't exist in the same way 20, 30 years ago.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's changed quite a bit.
And even with, talking about even like with the children, the puberty thing, why do you think that is that we have seen an increase over the past 20, 30 years? Have you been able to pin down anything specifically? Like, is there any food? Is there some sort of, I know you had mentioned environmental issues can be something as well, but have you actually been able to pin down why this might be happening, or is the scientific community still kind of up in the air on it?
I think there are several theories that come to play. One is that our nutrition is so much better. So there is a particular body weight, height to weight ratio that you have to get to in order to trigger puberty. And it used to be that happened at a later age.
Mm-hmm.
So, a perfect example is if you look at some kids going into, I guess I can call them kids, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, you look how much bigger college football players are now than they were back 20, 30, 40 years ago. I remember I was a big fan of the Washington football team back in the early 70s and on.
Mm-hmm.
And to have a linebacker or have a lineman at 250, 275 was big. Now you got people playing in college. I was looking at the lineman that got drafted the 6th round, it's for the Baltimore Ravens.
Mm-hmm.
He's 6'6", 360. And it's nothing to have somebody 300 pounds playing the line. But the point is that people get bigger so much faster now.
Yeah.
The nutrition is so much better. And so that seems to be one of the things people think about. The second issue that people talk about are these environmental estrogens and other hormones that may be involved in the development of puberty in ways that we don't quite understand. It's still up for debate as to whether that's true, but that's been a theory that certain people have proposed, and there may be some truth to that. The diet that we have is more inclusive of more hormones and more antibiotics and things in a way that wasn't true, say, 30 years ago.
Right. And kind of talking on your point about the sports thing, that's what amazes me is you've got, even nowadays in high schools, is a lot of these college recruiters is they're seeing these kids at 15, 16 years old that it's like 6'3", 6'4", 6'5". You're like, man, I don't think there's that many 6'5" kids, but it's like, no, sure enough, you're looking at some of these rosters for, Texas Tech, Ohio State, Michigan, and it's just all these kids are just gargantuan.
Yes, all that's true. And so that's been a big change in society in general. You look at how much heavier the average American is now. Mm-hmm. You look how much earlier people go into puberty. If you were to look at various studies, you can see that people have much greater caloric intake, calories, than they used to. And it's much easier to get calories now than it used to.
Oh, for sure.
So, just stop by any Circle K or 7-Eleven, you certainly can tell there's plenty of calories easily.
Oh, gosh. Well, but it's not the right calories, though. I mean, that's the thing that I'll agree with you is as much as we do have a lot more options now, with the fruit markets and all that sort of stuff, I think one of the biggest issues as well is we also have a problem where it's more processed carbs.
Get your shows, podcasts, gaming, or any live streaming on our TV network.
So talking about changes, though, is I wanted to ask in terms of with everything going on in the past year about with COVID and kind of what we've gone through now with this 2 years of it sort of thing, how has it affected your practice in regards to not just your own practice, but how have you been able to adapt with the practice and how has it affected maybe even some of your patients? Like, have you seen certain things come and go for, now that more people are inside and all that sort of stuff? What has it been from both your perspective as well as your patient's perspective since this whole COVID pandemic?
Well, it's been a real roller coaster for us all. I just, in my wildest dreams, when this first started, it was inconceivable that we would be at this particular point, the way that we have had to adjust. Right. But it's caused, and I'll start first just talking about the practice of medicine.
Sure.
It's really started to make us focus on a level of concern about infectious agents in a way that we didn't always do. Mm-hmm. If you knew someone had a really bad infectious disease, there were things that you took precautions for. You used gloves a certain way, and you would consider a mask under certain circumstances. Now, with that being routine, you have had to think some of the processes through that you have. How do you clean the rooms? Mm-hmm. How do you separate people in the waiting area? How do you examine a patient?
Right.
One of the things I learned very early in dermatology is that patients generally want you to touch their skin with your skin. They like to see that you're not worried about them. But with COVID, that means that you have to change that. You have to now use gloves, and you have to take precautions about how close you stand to people and wearing masks and things in a way that just didn't exist
Right.
years ago. And everyone's had to have a crash course in that regard. The second thing it's done is that it caused a lot of people who had medical problems to delay treatment. So
Right.
I am seeing, and I imagine many other doctors are seeing, people come in with things that they should have come in months ago. But as a result of fear of COVID and their concern about possibly going into an environment like a doctor's office, they have delayed treatment and delayed taking care of their health in a way that isn't always in the best regards.
Right.
The other thing is that some of the things that we see are a little bit different. So for instance, as a result of people wearing masks, the way that they have, I think that we see a lot of what we used to call acne mechanica, which is just a physical rubbing of something on someone's skin that can lead to acne outbreaks. You see it sometimes associated with sports like football and the chin strap and the helmet.
Right.
But now you're seeing more and more people come in who just seem to be developing more acne under the mask, and it's very definitive as to where it happens.
Sure.
So those sorts of things, I think, are the kinds of things that we see more commonly.
Well, and with the masks and everything, because I've heard of that as well, as people now constantly wearing the mask and skins drying out and all that sort of thing. Do you have any recommendations for people that might have to wear masks for a long time? Do you have any recommendations on how to maybe curb that, to things of how to maybe not have more massive breakouts depending on, per person and that sort of thing?
Sure. So I think that one of the things that happens when you wear the mask is, of course, your skin is getting a greater concentration of your breath, which has more moisture in it, as well as other things. And so I think one of the best things you can do is, and it sounds rather routine, but you need to moisturize more. And I would argue that you would use heavier moisturizers than you typically use. If you were to look at a moisturizer that's made for the face versus one that's made for the body, the one for the body tends to be thicker. It tends to have a higher concentration, maybe of petroleum or some other heavier ingredients in it. But for the face, you tend to make it lighter.
Sure.
In an effort to protect the skin, though, not only do you want to moisturize, but you want to protect the skin almost like a barrier. I think it's almost like a force field. You're going to put this moisturizer on in a way that is heavier than you might typically do it. And then you can put your mask over top. That shields your skin. It keeps the skin from having as much direct contact with your breath and the physical rubbing of the mask. So that would be an important thing to consider under those circumstances. I also think it's important to keep a clean mask.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, we use these cloth masks because they're a little easier and more convenient, but it's important to wash them frequently and to put on a good clean mask when you start a day.
Right. Because I think one of the biggest issues with that, I think all of us have seen to some degree, is you have it where in many cases people are wearing that same mask, 5, 6, almost 10 hours a day at some point.
Yes.
And, it is where, you do see people have, like I said, the larger breakouts on their face and their chin and, cheeks and that sort of thing. So you're right. I think that is something that people need to consider is every 2 hours. Is it every 2 hours you're supposed to replace it, or every hour, something along those lines?
I think there's a different set of recommendations that people have. If you're using a cloth mask, it might be slightly different. If you're using a paper mask, it might be different. I don't have a clear format as to how to go about doing it, but I like to use the word frequently, and I think people can interpret it as they may. In the beginning, when we didn't have as many masks, that was an issue. Now that we have more, certainly you can change it more frequently.
Contact us at foxdnetwork.com to set up your time to be on TV.
So kind of switching gears, getting off such a depressing topic about COVID, I've got to just ask, because I think as a skincare doctor, you probably have seen anything and everything in terms of all the online moms, the kind of old wives' tales that have been floating around for many years. I just got to ask, what are some of the common maybe misconceptions, myths, and just overall inaccuracies about skincare products that some folks are even still to this day using, that you would like to just kind of bust right here and say, look, you need to stop drinking this, or you need to start actually doing this. XYZ is actually healthy for you. So what are some of those that people might have misconceptions about?
Well, I think there's a number, and I will start with the first one. One is that I think the use of very heavy, oily products on your face is probably not in your best interest.
Right.
There are people that grew up with using Vaseline on all over their body, and they put it on their face and other places, and it can occlude your skin on the face and can lead to acne. So that's one of those things that people used to do a long time ago. Another thing that comes to mind is that there's a lot of belief about the use of various foods on the skin. So I see people rubbing lemons and olive oil and cucumbers. And, I had one lady come in, she gave me this very long description about what she was using on her skin. I said, that would be tremendous in a salad. I would think we should get together and make a salad with that. But I said, I don't think your skin eats in the same way that your face does. And so we often will feel that things that are good to eat are also good on our skin. The skin is a barrier, and it does absorb quite a number of things, but it absorbs many times very small things, small molecules. It doesn't absorb very large things. There are things that people put on their skin that they hope to have absorbed that doesn't necessarily get absorbed because it's way too large to ever get into the skin. It might be good to eat it, but it's not good necessarily to rub it on your skin. And there's a wide range of various topics that come and go that make people very excited about using them. There was, for a while, people were using chocolate on the skin quite often. Then people were using gold, and people were using all sorts of things. And they are reasonable things to consider. When you see a lot of the recommendations that you find online, or also in many products that you buy over the counter, they fall under a category of being what we call a cosmetic, meaning you have to prove to the government that you are not hurting someone by using it. But you don't necessarily have to prove that it makes any difference.
Right.
If I am making a high blood pressure tablet, I've got to prove not only does it hurt someone, but I have to prove that it actually lowers blood pressure. So there are different standards that people have to use in terms of proof to show that something is effective. Oftentimes, that line gets blurred when we're talking to patients. We often will find people who have something they read or something they saw from someone online. My daughter introduced me to a YouTube person or Instagram person that's very popular about skincare. A person makes millions of dollars a year talking about skincare. And I got a chance to listen. I really appreciated their enthusiasm. And I'd say, a good 40, 50% of what they said I thought was accurate, but the other 40 and 50 I did not feel was as accurate. And so, there are standards that we have to use in medicine that require us to be able to prove that they're making a difference.
Right.
And that's not necessarily the case with people who write online and for cosmetic products that you can buy over the counter.
Oh, for sure. And I think a lot of it too gets lost in translation in a lot of cases, especially with now that we have things like social media. I like your example of the lady that, is that a face salad? Is because, you take a little bit of the cucumber. Well, there's a little bit of the olive oil. Well, I heard that there's this Himalayan salt, and you're like, okay, I would definitely love to eat that Thursday night if you want to come by my house. But it does get to where there is that moment where a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and you don't really have any knowledge beyond just a cucumber and some salt. And it does, I think, in a lot of cases, harm people more than anything, because then you see or maybe not see, I should say, the after effects of, again, more breakouts, more this, more that than what people lead on.
Sure. Oftentimes when a person comes to the office and they've used this regimen, which, sounds wonderful, I ask them, how is it you came to know that this was a good choice for you? You chose this particular item and you have faith in it, and you're giving me some really good information about it. Why did you choose this and say not something else? And oftentimes you realize that, and they will realize that they don't have a great reason. They may have heard something from someone or read something somewhere. And it's not to say that these things aren't true. It's just, how do people come by information to know what to make decisions about? Social media, as you said, the internet in general has really caused the proliferation of a lot of ability for people to talk about all sorts of things, but not all of them necessarily know what they're talking about. Right. I think that there are reasons why you have certain people that do certain things. I don't know a lot about repairing cars. And when I go to my mechanic, I assume that he knows more about repairing cars than I do. And I may take my car to another shop and get a second opinion, but I don't believe that I can go online and look at everything and have the expertise that that person has. I always give this example to patients. They talk about this and they talk about this. I've had a couple of people who come see me and they'll ask me a question and then I'll give them an answer. And then they'll say, well, I read something different online. I think you're wrong about that. And I give the example by saying, I can go out here and I can find some plans online and I can build a bridge across the road here that goes over across the highway. But I am not an engineer, and I imagine you would not trust driving over that bridge with your family because you wouldn't think that is not my expertise. And just because I found it online doesn't necessarily mean that I know what I'm doing.
Right.
And it's not to say that you cannot find great information online. And I think having access to the internet is a great miracle. It's really something to see over my lifetime.
Yeah, like now.
But I think people put a lot of faith in things that they don't necessarily know, and they don't even know the source of where the information is coming from. You have to be cautious about where it comes from. If someone spends their life studying something, they may know a bit more than you might be able to know by looking at the first 3 rankings on Google.
Oh, gosh. And I think that's too.
Contact us at foxdnetwork.com to set up your time to be on TV.
Well, and oftentimes they're responding to the environment around them. So there are things that we've learned to do as a response to what the patients want. And there are things that are perfectly appropriate and important and have some background to them. But people want these things and they're going to find them and they are going to seek them. And so many times it's appropriate to offer them something that at least you can describe and know a bit more about.
Sure.
Than to have them fall prey to someone who has a really good website somewhere or a good Instagram account and has wonderful pictures that go with it.
Yes, exactly. And also, so I guess in a sense, does the cucumber thing not work?
So oftentimes it's used to reduce swelling around the eyes, that you would put a ring of cucumber around your eyes to take swelling away. Beyond that, I think every fruit, every vegetable probably has some redeeming qualities about it that can benefit your body. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why we need plants and vegetables and fruits. They may not necessarily do it by applying it to the skin. So these antioxidants that people talk about and all these wonderful things sometimes are not absorbed. They are great to take by mouth, but they don't necessarily change anything by putting them on the skin. A good example is lemon and citrus products. Everyone needs vitamin C. Vitamin C is one of those things that helps get rid of what we call free radicals, which has to do with aging and sun exposure. Those are the theories. But if you put that on and go in the sun, it's going to burn you in the shape of whatever it is that you happen to make. So if you say, yes, I'll put some lemon on my arms, you literally can burn your skin. There's something in there called coumarins, and that is a medicine that we use at times for treating people's skin with various skin diseases. But there's a natural version of it that's found in citrus products. And so you have to be careful sometimes about these things.
What are some things that people as consumers that we should look out for to make sure, hey, I'm not going to pick up some product that might actually have an adverse effect or just might not even work at all and it's just a holistic thing?
So I think that it's important that you try to use products that have as few ingredients as possible. More ingredients isn't necessarily better than less ingredients.
Sure.
One of the leading causes of skin reactions that occurs as a result of applying things to your skin is fragrance. The word fragrance is a word that is on many of the products that we use. And we like fragrance and we smell it, and each one is a little bit different. But fragrance can vary from item to item. Mm-hmm. The companies are not required to tell you what fragrance means. So what is fragrance in Ivory soap may be different than what it is in my cologne and some other choice. So that has turned out over the years to be one of the more challenging things that people have run across. There are some other things that people seem to have a little more trouble with. There's a compound called lanolin. Lanolin is a product that's, I think, primarily from sheep. Mm-hmm. Certain people have developed reactions to that over the years. You will find that occasionally in products, it helps make the product smoother. Another item that has been shown to show up that bothers people is something called parabens. Parabens are things that can cause reactions as well. They are used as stabilizers sometimes in a product so that it's nice and smooth and it stays nice and smooth the whole time you have it. And they have, they do add a really nice ingredient, a nice feeling to the product, but it may not be necessarily the case. You'll find that the more that anything appears in any products, the more likely it is that people will develop a reaction to it. So if I'm purchasing skincare products that are designed for moisturizing and cleansing, I want to have a relatively low soap, soap concentration. I don't know if you're probably too young to remember, but back in the older days when I was a younger person, there were commercials about Ivory soap, and they used to have a little baby in the tub, and they would have this bar of soap, and it floats, and it's really nice. And it smelled nice, and it was gentle. But it turned out it had a lot of pure soap in it, pure cleanser, and at a percentage that was a bit too high and would dry people's skin. It's important to have, I think, some kind of cleanser, moisturizer that has a relatively high moisturizer content. Many of the new soaps are like that, including the new Ivory. And it's important that you try to choose those things as opposed to choosing things that are really strong. There's a particular brand that I won't mention right now with the name that begins with, I won't mention it, but it's a lot of the old style type of products that people don't use anymore. And they seem very good. They're like throwbacks. It's the kind of thing your grandmother and grandfather used back on the farm. So it has to be some good. But they tend to be a little harsh. And they tend to strip the oils off the skin and not moisturize the skin as well as it should, and can lead to irritation, allergic reactions, and those sorts of things. So I think it's important to really focus on those things. If you can get products that don't have a lot of additional sudsing agents, that's not a bad thing either. Now, we're all psychologically trained that you want to see a good head of suds when you are using your soap, but that's an additional chemical that people add. Soap does not naturally suds. You have to add something to it. And so that may be an item that you can tolerate, and if you like it, that's fine. But for some people, that is a bit irritating. So some of the less exciting products that you see that maybe don't have quite as many advertisements are some of the best choices that you can make for trying to assist your skin.
Get your shows, podcasts, gaming, or any live streaming on our TV network.
Now, in terms of also keeping our skin clear and keeping our skin clean, what are some ways that we can do that as behind the scenes in our home? Like, is there the old chocolate myth, like don't eat chocolate, there's way too much sugar in it, or anything like that? Like, what are some ways that we can, just outside of, like you said, creams and lotions, what are some other ways that just our natural body, so we can actually keep our skin clean and clear throughout the months and days and weeks ahead?
Well, I think you have to keep in mind that your skin naturally produces a certain amount of secretions every day. It's necessary to help keep the skin healthy. There's oils and all sorts of things that come out on the skin that are important. They sometimes, believe it or not, contain things that are related to proteins. And these things are produced at a certain rate and require to keep the skin healthy. But there can be excess amounts of that. One of the reasons we wash our skin and we do these sorts of things is because some of those oils that are found on top of the skin are good food substances for various things, certain bacteria, certain yeast. So one of the things I encourage people to do is to be sure to, wash and use things regularly like that. You try to keep other things off your skin. One of the examples I talk about is try not to get a lot of hair products on your skin. So in an effort to spray your hair or to use those sorts of things, oftentimes there's a mist or maybe some things that end up on top of your skin. It was not what you intended to do, but it can lead to that. Makeup is nice, but that's another one of those things that you try to keep to a minimum without a high content of oil. The more oil you have in there, the greater chance you have of occluding the skin. And you try to minimize those sorts of things. Those are ways of preventing problems without necessarily having to change your routine a lot.
Because I remember kind of talking my personal story is I had zits really bad, and so there was always that old myth about don't eat sugar anything. Don't eat these specific red meats because you'll get oil in your skin and all that sort of stuff. So kind of going back to the old myth thing is I think that's one of those things where it's like, no, some of those things don't exactly. I mean, it helps to maybe cut out certain things like chocolate, but maybe it doesn't exactly make your skin as radiant as, again, the old wives' tale says that it does.
Sure, and I think that the jury is still out about many of the food substances. I was looking at a doctor give a lecture who was looking at the science related to food and acne. And much of it is really old. It's back from the 1950s. Wow. And some of those recommendations they used then are things that we sort of carry over to now. And we're still trying to determine what effect food does have. The biggest issue that's related to acne development is there's a reason it happens at the time it does. It doesn't happen when you're 5, doesn't happen when you're 90, but as your sex hormones change, as you go from being a little boy and little girl to becoming a teenager, your sex hormones like testosterone and estrogen increase, your growth hormone increase, a number of things increase. And those things are the things that really trigger acne. Mm-hmm. Funny story, back in the old days, back before the designer, so thinking about the Olympics, back in the old days of the Olympics, they would help screen people or suspect people of doping because they were taking male hormone. And the ones they used back then were testosterone and some of the things that are androgens, things that are known to make people stronger. But as a result, it also caused you to have a lot of acne. So if you look at some of the earlier things back in the 80s and 70s, some of those athletes were very big and they had a lot of acne. So elevating your male hormone, be it men or women, leads to, of course, muscle development, but it also leads to acne. And that's the biggest reason that young men have acne. Acne affects 99% of young men by 16 and 75% of young women. So that's a particular time in your life when you're going through that particular time. I tell people you don't cure acne, you outgrow acne. Now it can linger over into the adult life, but your hormonal changes that happen, you look at little children under 10, I mean, they're eating plenty of chocolate and having a great time and living life and their skin is perfect. And it's not because they're so much better at washing, so much better at choosing food. It's because they've yet to have experienced some of these hormonal shifts that we've talked about.
Well, that's good because I'm never was one to stop eating chocolate.
And the funny thing about it is that when you talk about dietary issues, specifically for things that people like, they're going to do it anyway. You're going to eat that chocolate anyway. And you're going to eat many other things that you like, fast food or whatever you like. So people may feel a little bad about it, but they're still going to do it.
Get your shows, podcasts, gaming, or any live streaming on our TV network.
Oh, of course. Now, kind of wrapping all this sort of stuff is I heard you do have actually some healthcare products at all. Do you mind kind of telling us about what you have on your website and kind of what you've all got set up with that?
Sure. Let me show you a couple things that we've come up with.
Sure.
So these products are products that I have helped to put together. The company name is Dr.CLEARSKIN. And they're going to be available. They're available at our website. And I put them there and chose these particular products as a result of a couple things I've noticed over the years. Mm-hmm. I'll show you one in particular. Sure. We carry a sunscreen and it's got a face and it has a person looking that direction, but it's particularly focused on people of color. One of the reasons I did that is because the incidence of skin cancer in people of color is increasing like it is in everyone else. But when they are discovered, they tend to be more advanced than they are with an average patient. Right. Sometimes people believe that's a result of lack of access to having to seeing a doctor. And some people believe it's related to the idea that we haven't done a great job of educating people of color about the use of sunscreen. Right. So I put together this product to try to help highlight that for some people. You'll be surprised the number of people who are people of color that don't believe that they need to use sunscreen.
Really?
And I often tell people it doesn't take much to burn, especially nowadays with global warming and the climate changes that are happening. People can burn and you can have skin cancer. So that's one of the products I developed. Another collection that I've come up with is something related to shaving. So you'll find quite a number of people who have shaving related problems, particularly when people have particularly curly hair and very coarse hair. The products that I've put together here as a set are designed to help minimize some of the problems that come from shaving. So I use the name Dr.CLEARSKIN because I think that part of what we're trying to do is clear people's skin.
Sure.
But they can be used to help prevent some of the shaving problems and also to keep them at a minimum. There some of the choices I've made that include some of the vitamin A creams, some of the microdermabrasion products, or things that we use in dermatology to help treat people with shaving related problems. It can be quite a disfiguring and difficult circumstance for many people. And I thought that there needed to be a collection of products that could help minimize this with people who have shaving related problems. So there are many plant-based items that are in these products that are there in an effort to try to enhance keeping people's skin clear while shaving. So those are two of the things that I thought about when we were coming up with this product line. I find that there are some problems that need to be targeted and maybe discussed a bit more, brought to the public's attention in a way that would really help to educate certain communities.
Sure.
And to help with problems that may be given not quite given the type of attention that they need to have.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's fantastic. I mean, and with your product line, have you had a lot of success with it? Has there been a lot of people that said, oh my gosh, my skin's actually, have you gotten the 5-star review, the hundreds of emails from all your followers, that sort of thing, that said, oh my gosh, this is awesome, buy it on?
Not quite yet, because we're just launching the product line. But I think that, many of the things that I will be highlighting in this product line, this is one of many other topics that we're going to address, are things that are tried and true. Vitamin A creams that have been shown to be helpful, vitamin C that's in some of the cleansers, the microdermabrasion sort of beads that are in some of the products that can help exfoliate the skin in an aggressive manner. Those are techniques and things that we've used, again, in dermatology for quite a period of time. They have been shown to be a benefit. And I think this is one of the first times that people have put them together in a particular series or a package that brings each of these items together with a plan about how to use them.
Well, that's awesome. And I do hope that, as your product lines, I definitely wish you the most best of success. And I do hope more people are able to, get a hold of your products and use it. And it's wonderful to see more natural things like this on the market to let people know, hey, you're not just putting a bunch of random chemicals in your body that might get rid of your skin abrasions or whatever it may be.
Yes, that's very reasonable. You're right. I think people have become really savvy consumers, and they know things that are beneficial in a way that maybe we didn't before. We talked about the internet, and that's a great advance that people are able to discover new things and try new things and make more informed decisions about some of these choices.
Right, exactly. Well, Doctor, it has been an amazing pleasure talking with you. Thank you, honestly, for all the information and all the stuff. And of course, folks, we'll definitely have a link to his website in our video as well. Again, Jeffrey, Doctor, Mr. Doctor, thank you for coming on and being a part of this network with us.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it, and good luck to you.
All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.